Hi everybody, this is Dylan from Highway IELTS. Some of you would have met me on Saturday. I've been looking over some of the writing tasks that have been sent in, and a couple of issues keep on coming up. So I'll be addressing them in this forum, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me to elaborate. So today we'll be looking at answering the IELTS Writing Academic Task 1. So this is for the academic candidates, and we'll be focusing on the graph question. So firstly, what is Task 1 Academic? It's a short report on given data. It's 150 words. There's no penalty for writing more than that, but you might waste time if you do. There is a very heavy penalty if you don't reach the word count though, so make sure that you do make 150 words. If you fail to do that, you will not get anything higher than a 6. No subheadings, no headings and bullet points. Even though it's an academic report, you're not allowed to insert any of that. Give it about 20 minutes in your test because you need more time for your essay. And there are 3 possible types of question. There's a graph, a process, or a map. Today we will be focusing on this one, the graph. Bear in mind for your exam you could get any one of these 3. So today we're only dealing with the graph. How is it assessed? So when you write your script, the examiner is looking at 4 things. The first one is task achievement, and basically what that means is answering the question and accurately representing the data. And a very important element of that is providing an overview, which we're going to go into detail about that shortly. The next one is coherence and cohesion. This really just means paragraphs and linking devices. So the examiner is looking to see if your report flows logically from one part to the next. The next one is lexical resource, which is vocabulary. So you need to make sure that you use synonyms. You avoid using the same word repetitively. Collocations, so these are words that go naturally together. And spelling. Spelling is important in this task, and if your spelling is not up to par, you will suffer, your score will suffer as a result. The last one is grammatical range and accuracy. You have to make sure that you use a mix of simple and complex sentences. So you want to avoid being too flowery and wordy, but you also want to avoid being too terse and abrupt. So let's look at what this all means in practice. Here's a sample question, and this came up in February 2019. So it tells us that the chart below gives information about global population percentages and distribution of wealth by region. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So if we look at the graph we've been given, we notice we have 8 regions along this axis, and we've got percentages going up on that side. And for each region we have 2 bars. So if we just take the first one, North America, we've got green, which is population. We see that North America only has 6% of the world's population, but the pink, which is global wealth, it has about 34% of the world's wealth. So you'll notice that the bars are not exact, they are slightly above the parameter there, so the examiner's wanting to see that you understand that. So using language like approximately or around 6%. If you said around 7%, you wouldn't be marked down for that, as long as you're showing that you know that it's not exactly on a line. So it's very important, the first step here is that we get to grips with what the data is actually showing us. And as you can see, it varies quite a lot. So for Europe, we have something similar. The green bar is smaller than the pink bar, and similarly for the rich Asia Pacific. For all the other regions, it's the other way around. So you need to spend a minute or 2 just orienting yourself in the data, making sure that you understand exactly what you're seeing. Now, before we move on, there's words here that you can highlight in the test. If you take a pencil or a highlighter, chart. We can think of synonyms for chart. We could call it graph, bar graph, visuals, anything like that. Information, we can change that for data. Distribution of wealth by region. The word region we could swap out for area or something like that. So let's move on to what we're going to do with that. So the first step is to paraphrase, which is what I was getting at there. The first thing we have to do to introduce the task is to paraphrase. So if we go back, They told us the chart below gives information, and we can paraphrase that. We can say the graphs compare 8 regions of the world in relation to their share of the global population and their share of the world's wealth. So you'll notice there I've used some of my own language. I've used the word compare and I've used the word share to show the proportion that's involved. Another possible paraphrase would be the bar graphs illustrate. Illustrate is a good word for this task. For several different regions of the world, their proportion of global population as well as their share of global wealth. This one might actually be better because I've used the word proportion here and the word share there. So I'm showing the examiner that I have options as far as lexical resource goes. So this is how you're going to open your task 1. You're going to look at your topic and paraphrase it into your own words. That's your first sentence. Could be 2 sentences. You can break it into 2 sentences if need be. Next step. Now we need to write our overview. So earlier on I said that this was an important element. I'm going to describe what an overview is and why it's important. So to write an overview, you need to answer these questions. What jumps out at you in the data? Or what is the most salient or obvious feature? So let's go back and let's have a look. So what you should be seeing here is that there's no relationship between the size of your population and your share of global wealth. So we see America has got a relatively small population, but huge share of wealth. And if we look at an opposite extreme like China, we've got a much bigger share of population, but a much smaller share of global wealth. So the thing that's jumping out at me here is that there really is no relationship. You can have a very small percentage, a very small population with a huge amount of wealth, and you can have a huge amount of wealth with a small population like the rich Asia Pacific. So that is what we're going to use for our overview. We're going to say the most obvious feature of the data is that there is no discernible relationship between population size and national wealth. Another way of saying that would be the graphs clearly show that a country's wealth and the size of its population are not connected. So either one of those will do. They're saying the same things, but I'm just giving you 2 different options. So what we've shown the examiner is that we can spot the most obvious feature. So these 2 sentences, step 1 was our paraphrase, step 2 was our overview. These 2 sentences together form the introduction. Then we're going to leave a line and go to step 3. Now step 3 is where we're actually going to start analyzing the data. So very often you can't describe the whole thing, you're going to have to be selective. So we're going to pick some features and describe them. You want to look for opportunities for comparing and contrasting or describing things in detail because that's how you show off your language. So I've started off here. Although only accounting for around 6% of the Earth's human population, North America controls approximately 34% of its wealth. So what I've done there is I've taken this first graph and I've turned that into a sentence. And you see I've used some good language here, although only accounting for. This is a collocation, what I mentioned earlier. The next thing I've done is a similar situation. So here I'm talking about a similarity between 2 things. A similar situation obtains in the wealthier countries of the Asia Pacific region, where the share of global wealth outstrips population share by about 5 times. So just to check that I've said the right thing there, I've got 5% population and I've got almost 25% for global wealth. Then I'm going to follow that with a contrast. So equally striking is the data for India, where about 1% of the globe's wealth has to be distributed among a population that constitutes 16% of the total world population. So in this paragraph, I've gone for the extremes. I've looked at North America and Asia Pacific as the wealthiest with the smallest population and contrasted that with India, which is a high population and low wealth. And I've used words like this throughout. Equally. Equally is a linking phrase because it refers back to the previous sentence. Similar is a linking word because it refers back to the previous sentence. Now I'm going to leave a paragraph division and I'm going to carry on. So now that I've set the parameters, the 2 extreme examples, I'm looking in the middle. Between these extremes, and these is a linking word because it refers back, we can observe a series of less radical discrepancies. European wealth sits at around 30% of the international total, which serves 15% of the people on Earth. Africa, China, and the remainder of the Asia-Pacific region reflect similar gaps. So gap and discrepancy are words with a similar meaning. Those are synonyms. While Latin America appears to have the greatest parity of all regions between its shares of global population and global wealth. So I've chosen Latin America to finish off there because it stands out to me as the one that is the most equal. Then we're going to do a very brief concluding sentence, which is optional, but you could just add a rephrase of your overview. So it's clear from the data that population size and wealth are not connected. As long as you've got your word count, you can choose to add a concluding sentence or leave it out. It's not actually that important. But here we've addressed all the requirements. We've paraphrased, we've done an overview, and we've analyzed all the data. So as a recap there, step 1, paraphrase the topic. So make sure you've understood it and put it into your own words. Then give an overview. So you've got to look at the most obvious feature, turn that into a sentence, and together those two sentences make your introduction. Then leave a line and launch into your analysis, which can either be 1 or, as we did here, 2 paragraphs. And then it's very important that you allow some time at the end, and I'd say you need at least 3 minutes to proofread and edit if necessary. Looking back, I've seen I actually made a spelling mistake here, and I would want to rephrase one of my sentences here to make it a bit more concise. This one I would actually rephrase. That would take me perhaps half a minute to rephrase. So it's a good idea to work in pencil. If you're on the computer-based test, obviously it doesn't matter. You can just delete and backspace. But proofreading is essential. So allow yourself at least 3 minutes to do that and make any edits that you need to. So for task 1, as you can see, there's quite a lot of material in there. There's quite a lot that you have to remember. And so it's a very good idea for you to send in a sample to get it looked at so that you know that you're on the right track. Our academic team is here, ready to assess your writing and give you the guidance that you need. For a small admin fee, we'll give you a detailed feedback report, very quick turnaround time, and most importantly, peace of mind before your exam so that you know that you're on the right track. Thanks everyone, I hope you found this useful.